Croeso, good morning and welcome to this multi-location meeting of the Environment Regeneration Streetscene Services Scrutiny Committee on the 22nd of March 2024. I'm Councillor Sean Percy. I'll be chairing the meeting this morning. As usual, can you please make sure your phones are switched to silent during the meeting? Just going to check mine now. There we go. Again, for members on Teams, if you can raise your electronic hand, and members in the chamber, raise your hand if you wish to speak, and we'll call you in turn then. So for the purposes of the declarations today, I'd like to confirm that we'll be scrutinising item 3 on the scrutiny agenda, and then items 7, 8, 13, 14, 17 and 18 on the cabinet papers. So I'll now move on to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Grimshaw, Steph.
I'm unsure whether to declare this or not, so if in doubt, declare it. I work for Welsh Women's Aid and I will be speaking upon violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Steph. Are there any other declarations?
I see no other declarations, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on to agenda item 3, which is a verbal update on the Waste Strategy Action Plan, Measure 11. I'm not sure, is Mike Roberts taking this? Mike?
Yeah. Okay, that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just apologise first of all. I know you requested a full report, which we couldn't manage in time for the meeting, and obviously there will be a full report coming to the next meeting covering the waste strategy as a whole. Given members probably won't have background papers to hand, I wrote down the Waste Strategy Action Plan approved in April 23, including 18 measures, and measure 11 being to conduct formal consultation with households, the workforce and their trade union representatives and other stakeholders such as trade waste customers on moving to 3 weekly collections of non-recyclable waste with the existing 3-bag 140 litre wheeled bin limit, alongside continuing with weekly collections of recyclable waste including food, paper and card, plastic and metals, household batteries and glass. The consultation to explore the way forward with green waste and nappy collection frequencies. Measure 11 was approved, notwithstanding a suggestion by this committee following a scrutiny task and finish team that there should be a deferral of consultation. In terms of a verbal update on Measure 11, consultation on 3 weekly collections is programmed to commence on the 6th of May and run for 6 weeks, and a briefing note is being prepared to be sent out to all members. As per the original report, any proposals further to the consultation would be brought back to Cabinet Board for decision.
Thank you, Mike. Do any members of the committee have any questions? Councillor Grimshaw.
Thank you, Chair. I do have concerns about this and how it's going to impact Aberavon and Baglan Moors. We're already struggling with fly tipping and extra bin waste, and I just want to thank the waste team that are kind of working passionately on this. It's not an easy fix at all, and I don't want to kind of pretend that it is. I appreciate it's going to go out to consultation, but in kind of previous experience, it goes out to consultation, it goes out to the public. They struggle to engage. We've got people who aren't on the internet and that kind of thing, and I'm just concerned that with the consultation, if we do get poor feedback, that we're going to go ahead anyway. I also have concerns about kind of
Apologies, those on Teams. We just had the slightly late fire alarm test in the chamber. So, Councillor Grimshaw, just to continue with your point.
I think I've lost my train of thought now, but I think I've relayed my concerns. I think Mike Roberts understands the issues. I'm not saying that the officers don't; they really do. But yeah, I just want to relay these concerns and hope that we don't move to 3 weekly collections, because I don't think we're quite there yet. I think we need to get a handle on the problem as it is before we move on to 3 weekly.
Thank you, Steph. I've got an indication from Councillor Andrew Dacey as well. Andrew.
Thank you. I'd like to back Stephanie up on that. Obviously, Aberafan and Bagley, particularly Aberafan, but struggling as it is. So I'd like to back Stephanie up on that as well.
Thank you. Do any other members have any questions? Okay, can't see any other indications on this item. I've just got a couple of things I want to say. So just to thank Mike for giving that brief update this morning. Totally understand the difficulties in pulling together reports at short notice. So there was no problem whatsoever with that a more thorough report coming to the next meeting, and I think members would be interested to get into the detail of all the measures that were included in the waste strategy. Just in terms of the current policy position, I wonder if the Cabinet member wants to say anything in terms of what the Cabinet's view is on 3 weekly collections. I think one of the reasons that I wanted this item to come was perhaps some of the confusion that's arisen from different statements from members of the Cabinet on this particular policy. So I would really appreciate some clarity from the Cabinet member in terms of is this something that the Cabinet is actively considering or not? Obviously, we understand that the officers are working towards the strategy, but there's been several statements from members of the Cabinet that this is something that isn't being considered or has never been considered. So I'd appreciate clarity from the Cabinet member on that point.
Yeah, I'll be very brief on it because Mr. Roberts have already outlined the stance on it, and I need to be careful that I don't get drawn into predetermination matters as well. From a Cabinet perspective, we are keen to go out on consultation, and at such time a decision will be made.
Thank you. An indication as well from Nicola Pierce. Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that obviously the waste strategy and associated action plan is quite a comprehensive document. We've got a number of recommendations in there to enable the local authority to achieve the targets that we are required to achieve by Welsh Government to avoid financial penalties. Now, the recommendation that members are talking about today is just one of those 18 recommendations. And there was the budget that members have just approved does not take into account any consequences of implementation of that recommendation. And as Mike has indicated, we will be bringing a full report to members in the next few months, which will identify our progress in relation to all of the recommendations to see whether our strategy is working, i.e. whether it's driving up our recycling performance, and therefore whether we are on target to achieve the Welsh Government requirements with in terms of that 70% delivery of recyclable materials. As I said, Mike will bring that forward as part of a comprehensive report, which will give you updates on all of the recommendations, not just one, because they are all interlinked, and it's a combination of the effectiveness of all of the recommendations which will enable us to reduce our waste streams and increase our recycling streams. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Nicola. I think that point around the package and suite of measures was one that was really noted by the Scrutiny Committee during the task and finish group as well, and how important it was to make sure that all those measures have time to bed in and that we evaluate them. So I think members of the committee really appreciate that point. I've got two other indications from Councillor Tim Bowen and Councillor Wyn Carpenter, so I'll call in Tim first.
Thank you, Chair and members. Just one quick question. If we do go out to consultation for the 3 weekly collections, the purple bags get put out with the black bins. Would there be a different strategy for that? Because, you know, to have nappies and all pads and everything hanging about for 3 weeks is going to be actually horrendous for residents.
Thanks, Tim. I'll take Councillor Carpenter's question as well, and then we can round off this item. So, Wayne.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to Nicola and Mike for clarifying this situation. There's been a lot of confusion, which has mainly been brought about by the misuse of social media, that the 3 weekly collection was all part of this year's budget. And I think I'm right in saying it's a recycling target exercise and nothing to do with this year's budget. And I just want to thank you for clarification of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne. And I don't know who wants to respond on Councillor Bowen's question. Mike, do you want to come in?
Just as I said at the beginning, we are doing a briefing note for all members that will be sent out. As per the very original recommendation, there will be it will be based the configuration we go out to consultation on will be based on the wheel bin or 3 bags if in the 3 bag area 3 weekly. All the materials we talked about weekly, and there is a proposal being put forward to provide a basis for consultation on what happens with the pink bags and the green. So that'll all be set out in the consultation in the briefing note that will come to all members before the consultation starts.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, I can't see any other. Oh, sorry, Councillor Scott Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add on my previous statement that I should have mentioned then, it needs to be clear that at this stage, the recommendation is an officer's recommendation. It's not a cabinet recommendation. At such time that it comes before the cabinet, then obviously the cabinet will make a decision. However, the cabinet are very keen to make sure that a consultation is undertaken widely across the county borough.
Well, I will just for clarity on that point. That is a point I do very much disagree with. The waste strategy was approved by the cabinet board, so at that point, the recommendations within that strategy, including the decision to consider 3 weekly collections, has already been considered by the cabinet and approved by the cabinet board. So I do disagree with that point. Obviously, a decision hasn't been made whether or not to implement it, but a decision has been made by the cabinet board to consider and move forward towards that as part of the waste strategy. And I think that needs to be made very, very clear. It's not just an officer proposal. It has had the endorsement of the cabinet board.
Well, if I can come back to it, I'm happy for the director to come in on this, but my understanding of it is the cabinet have agreed to go out and consult with the residents. But I'll leave the director come in to clarify.
Absolutely, that's what I believe to be the case. I'm just making clear that the cabinet board endorsed the recommendations in the report that included moving towards 3 weekly bin collections, and it's not correct to suggest the cabinet haven't endorsed that position. That is the position the cabinet have endorsed. I don't know if Nicola wants to add anything to that point.
Just for clarity, the cabinet member is correct. You've endorsed, or the cabinet have endorsed, the need to go out to consultation because we need to put a proposal in front of the public to indicate that if we need to achieve 70% recycling targets and the other recommendations are not effectively enabling us to get to that 70% target, and we need to look at alternative means of doing it, we need to consult with the public, and we need to give the public as much information to ensure that they are aware of all of the implications or the impacts associated with 3 weekly collections. So we're not going to expect them to put out all of their waste and recycling every 3 weeks, which is sometimes the confusion on the part of the public. And we need to make sure that we give them a clear proposal as part of that consultation exercise. We secure the opinion of the public, and then we make an informed recommendation to members after that consultation period has completed. And then members can take on board the feedback from the public before progressing with any decision making. So yes, I agree that there has been an endorsement of the recommendation as part of a wider suite of recommendations within the waste strategy and action plan. However, it is only to go out to consultation, and I think everybody would agree that it's important for us to gauge the opinion of the public based on information in relation to how we're going to deliver the waste service going forward, as opposed to just saying we are going to collect your waste every 3 weeks, which is not the case. That decision hasn't been made. We need to go out to consultation so that we get that feedback from the public, and that can inform any future proposals we take forward as a council.
Thank you, Nicola. Does anyone else wish to come in on this point? Okay, brilliant. I think it has been very helpful to have that clarification today from officers and the cabinet member in terms of what that current position is. I'm happy to move on now to the next item and move to the scrutiny of the cabinet board papers. So the next item is item 7, healthy travel charter.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just make some overarching comments, just to remind members that the activity that we've taken on board in entering the Healthy Travel Charter is on the basis that there was no grant or no budget made available for its delivery. So the work that we've done today has been absorbed by Joy's road safety team and is on top of the other activities in this area. That said, the Healthy Travel Charter obviously is complementary and supports our other activities around this subject matter, which falls under this committee's responsibility. And in that respect, it supports our decarbonisation plans, our wider modal shift, behavioural change, and of course contributes to our health and well-being agenda that's set out within our corporate plans. So I didn't want to say much more than that. Joy's on the call and we'd be happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you for that introduction there, Dave. And thanks for bringing the update report as well. I know members had quite a bit of interest in this previously and asked for to be sort of kept abreast of the implementation of the charter. So I do appreciate that, and also to Joy for taking some time to discuss the issue with me recently as well. I think my only concern in terms of the report that's in front of us today is perhaps that maybe our peer assessment has been a little bit generous with some of the scores, and I think I perhaps expressed that to Joy outside the meeting, where we've definitely made progress, or we are definitely doing some of the things the charter asks us to do, but whether we're necessarily leading the way on some of those issues, I think can be perhaps questioned. I think it's very important that where we've got room for improvement, that the scoring and the charter reflects that. So I think that was my only comment really, is that it almost kind of suggests we've kind of finished and maxed out on some of the items, and I think there is still a way to go. I thought it was important just to express that, given the interest the committee's had in this issue.
No, I'd agree, Chair. We're not leading the way by any means. We're making some good strides in taking the agenda forward, but there is still much to do. That's obviously the delivery of some of these things we are trying to improve on, but we're reliant upon sort of securing grants, funding, and support from other agencies really. So until such time as we get to a point within the sort of criterion of assessment, I think we'll only get to a certain point before we have to decide that we have to invest ourselves as an authority, and certainly if we want to be leading the way. That said, I think the criterion assessment has been robust. I take on point your concerns that they may have been a little generous, but you know, it's quite a strict criterion, and if we've got the provision, it might not be the best, but it scores within the sort of matrices that are used for that purpose. Not to make any excuses around that, it is what it is. But I would agree, you know, we will always strive to improve all activities around the action plan. I don't know if you wanted to say anything, Joy, further.
Not really. I agree with what you're saying, and Councillor Percy and I had this conversation last week. I think perhaps it's around the wording where it says we're leading the way. And perhaps it is about the sort of, as you've said, the provision that we have will get us to that point. whether it's the best provision in the world or whether, as we were discussing last week, Councillor, the cycling provision you would prefer to be of a higher quality or a better quality. And that is something we are looking into. So, you know, there is always room for improvement, and you can see some things there that are saying we're just getting going. And they are the more perhaps difficult to tackle, but nevertheless, we are ploughing forward. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. Do any members have any questions or queries on this item? I can't see any indications. This item is for information, therefore we note the report. So I'll now move on to agenda item 8, which is performance measures on pages 27 to pages 48. I have an indication from pre-briefing. Do any officers wish to add anything to the report before we go to questions? No, okay, I'll go to Councillor Cathy James.
Thanks, Chair. Right, I've just got a question on indicator 4, I think it is. Unsurprisingly, it's the only one that's negative, really. Before I start, it's great generally to see the report and see that most things are hitting target and everything. Most things are generally heading in the right direction. But number 4, the major planning decisions, is rather worrying. If I'm interpreting the graph correctly, there was 1 application determined on time in Q1, and there've been none since then. I appreciate there are staffing issues, that's been explained, but performance has been below target for a year now, so it would be reassuring to have some sort of timescales in terms of the recruitment that's happening to tackle that problem.
Thanks, Cathy. Kerry, did you just come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor James. I understand the concerns, and you rightly raised the point, and I know we've discussed this particular KPI previously. As far as recruitment goes, I'm happy to report a much improved figure position. We've had a successful recruitment drive over recent months, and that's come through a sort of a mixed picture of sort of internal promotions and also external appointments as well. As far as those officers, in terms of the external appointments, they're currently working their notice periods at the moment with their current employers. So we're looking to bring those people on board in the next sort of 3 to 4 weeks. In terms of the senior planning officer positions, and these are the guys obviously that deal with the more complex and contentious applications and major applications that this particular KPI sort of relates to. We'll finally have a full complement of 5 senior planning officers to deal with those applications. So that is, a really positive, and that's been quite a difficult role, if I'm honest, in terms of being able to get those officers those individuals with the sort of the level of expertise that are able to sort of hit the ground running then, if you like. So it's been a real challenge getting those appointments, but we're in a much better position now in that respect. There is currently 1 vacancy still on the development management structure, and that relates to an enforcement officer post. We're currently out to advert on that post, and I think the closing date for that is mid-April. So we've only really got one post to fill from that respect. The one point I perhaps wanted to make as well, in addition to obviously the more positive reports around recruitment, is I think the wording of this particular KPI is not necessarily helpful. And what I mean by that is that the easiest way to meet this target is to refuse any application that is sort of coming towards the end of its sort of 8 weeks or 16 weeks as relevant. So clearly that's not what we want to be doing. Officers quite rightly liaise and consistently discuss with applicants and developers how their scheme can and should be improved. And what this KPI doesn't allow us to report at this stage is where we've sort of agreed extensions of time with developers and applicants. So what I'm hoping to do is, we can't obviously tweak the wording of this KPI in the middle of a reporting year, but I'll be looking for the next reporting year to tweak the wording of it to perhaps give members a more accurate reflection of the applications that the team are delivering on time, which would include then those applications that we've agreed extensions of time with. So hopefully, Councillor James, that gives you a little bit more reassurance that we are in a much better position now, and hopefully moving forward, we will start to see improvement in this particular KPI. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Kerry. Cathy, do you wish to come back?
Just to say thank you. It's reassuring to hear that the recruitment has gone so well, and I take your point that doing something quickly isn't necessarily the best thing to be doing with it. So I appreciate the KPI is not quite as subtle as it could be. So thank you for that.
Thank you, excellent. I can't see any other indications on this item for performance indicators. So members, this report's for monitoring, therefore we note the report. So we'll now move on to agenda item 13, which is the Highways Works Programme, 24-25, pages 101 to 116. Before I go to questions, do officers wish to add anything to the report? I can't see any indications from officers there. Okay, so we've got two questions on this one. My first indication is from Councillor Rosalind Davis. Ros?
Apologies, I've had to change to my iPad. It was regarding the rural lanes. Is it for the whole of the county borough, and is it just for patching or resurfacing in certain areas?
If I may, Chair.
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
so first of all, it's for rural roads across the valley areas. You in the you see the title of the column that it's in, and my colleague Ali Jones, I think, is on the call, or should be on the call, who could provide you with detail. But I mean, there are various measures that have been used on the rural roads. For example, jet patching. We've seen that's been used across the county borough extensively in previous years. So that would definitely be one of the types of works that would be going on. I mean, quite often in rural roads as well, there's need for edging repairs and that sort of thing, where the edge of the road is starting to go. So it could cover a range of things, Councillor.
Thanks, Mike. Ros?
And would councillors have to put in then, because of some rural lanes that we've got, to have them patched up to a tidy standard, because there are some big issues in my area?
I think Ali's already got a very long list. Obviously, we do survey all the roads as set out previously in reports. So your main sort of roads are covered by technical surveys, skid resistance, that sort of thing, and all the ones that aren't covered by the technical surveys, you do have visual surveys, which are done on a sort of 10 meters squared, and then that's how they produce the maps that they bring to the members' surgeries to show members the condition of the roads in your wards.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, the next question's one from me, and it's in relation to well, drop curbs in particular, but there's also provision of pedestrian crossings included within the Highways Capital Works Programme to be funded from our own capital monies. And I just wondered, given that there's grant funding available for schemes of that nature, why we've decided to fund some of those schemes from our own capital funding pot rather than to secure grant funding.
My colleague Dave Griffiths might be able to help you in a minute, but I'm assuming that the other grant money is talking about perhaps active travel money. And I know that the network management team are talking to colleagues in traffic who do the bid for the active travel schemes. And they're talking about if there's perhaps programs of dropped crossings that we could do. Traditionally, there's been one or two of these drop crossings in the program every year. Obviously, there is a mailbag that comes into the council. Some areas get raised more than others, and some areas there's more pedestrian vehicle conflict issues. You know, you can in some areas, people with mobility scooters and things, if they're going off the pavement onto the road a long way before a junction and having to drive down because they can't get down at the crossing point, that's obviously a road safety issue. So historically, one or two of these drop curves have gone into the programme.
Steve, did you want to
Yes,
come in?
Yes, I can add some commentary, Chair. Wherever we do get a grant, we will try to maximise that opportunity to have as wider area as possible captured where we can do improvements for drop curbs, particularly around active travel schemes. The problem we have is obviously the active travel network map is defined, and there will be areas then within neighbourhoods which fall outside of that sort of scheme defined boundary, to describe it as in simple terms. And that's where we need some allocation within the capital programme to address some of those issues. Clearly, as well, from a road safety perspective and the learner travel measures, we do inspections of safe routes to school. And where we identify shortcomings there, we also try to secure a grant to address those areas. But I think it's fair to say there will always be areas in our communities that would fall outside of those sort of grant-aided schemes, where we'll probably need to have an allocation within the programme to address some of those particular crossing points.
Thanks, Dave. I suppose to come back on that, I think I agree with you, and I suppose my concern has come from the fact some of these schemes are in areas that are within the defined settlements under the Active Travel Act, and some also relate to areas where we've got ongoing active travel schemes under development as well. What my expectation would be is that our grant funding, our own capital funding, would only be limited to communities that fall outside of the defined settlements. So actually that tends to be some of the smaller valley areas.
Yes.
But there's schemes here in built up areas, including sandfields,
Yes.
which was just a little bit concerning to see in terms of the allocation of the money, which is why I've raised the question. So I don't know if there just needs to be a little bit of tightening up of the discussions between the two teams, and how we're filtering those schemes. I'm sure there's drop curbs that need to be done in in the valley communities that perhaps could use that funding.
Yes, indeed, and the teams do have dialogue around obviously the detail of the programme. Even if it's a major scheme where we're carrying out work, well, we would definitely pick up any improvements necessary. But just because it's within the network map, we won't necessarily have funding to do all of those corrective measures. What we do have is some core allocation funding to pick up some of those items like barrier renewal or replacement to make sure they're compliant. And we can tackle some of those scenarios that you've outlined, Chair. But that will be subject to how much funding we've got available. So there is always some work going on in that area. But as I say, where we can capitalise the grant, we always do. And we can do some more work perhaps with our colleagues in network management when we look at that, as you say, more closely then going forward.
Thank you. Do any other members have any questions or queries on the work programme? I can't see any indications. So members, the recommendations are listed on page 103 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposed by Councillor Rob Wood in the chamber, and a seconder.
I second, Chair.
Councillor Roslyn Davis, thank you. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I'll take it this decision is supported to Cabinet.
I see no indications to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, this decision is supported to Cabinet.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, we'll move on now to agenda item 14, street lighting energy consultation response on pages 117 to 148. Officers, I believe you've got something, an introduction to this report?
Yes,
an
Chair,
update to the recommendation as well.
Yeah, I understand there was some queries about why the latter recommendations were in the report, and it's to do with keeping the council's options open should there be a need to look at this going forward. You know, as we said before, when you have to do, you know, things don't happen overnight. You quite often have to do consultations to be able to understand the implications of things, and that so that officers are in a position to advise members if that's necessary. So on the feedback today, we have got an amended recommendation, which Chloe is going to put into the chat so that all members can see the detail. And perhaps if she puts that in now and members have a minute or so just to have a look at that before there's a debate on the items that come up. But the proposal is to basically amalgamate recommendations 3 and 4 and to change that recommendation. So if Chloe, if you could paste it into the chat, yeah, so that
I believe it's in the chat. I believe it is in the chat. I'm quite happy to read it out. It's not the longest recommendation, and it is to approve a pilot study of park nighttime lighting to gain a better understanding of the impacts of such saving strategies, and thereby enable evidence-based decisions to be made in the future if considered appropriate. Prior to such a pilot taking place, a further report is brought before members giving details of the geographical location of the proposed pilot study, the duration of the pilot study, and the times where the lights will be turned off or on, all to be agreed by members prior to any pilot being undertaken. The results of the pilot scheme then being referred to members to inform any future decisions if considered necessary. So that's the amended recommendation, which amalgamates the recommendations 3 and 4. It substantively says the same thing, which is to kind of move ahead with a pilot study, but there's a bit more detail, I suppose, in terms of the rationale behind it. So I do have indications from members on this report. Obviously, the report is looking at the outcome of the consultation, and of course recommendation, the other recommendations we have include recommendation 2, which is to approve the dim-in of lights, which has already been effectively endorsed in the budget as well. So this report captures the whole consultation and the dim-in, and then the potential future night lighting proposals. So I've got some indications from members. I'll start with Councillor Stephanie Grimshaw. Steph.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me to come to the committee, not being a member of the committee itself anymore. I just want to raise concerns about how this kind of process has gone in relation to violence against women and girls. I do urge members to vote against this recommendation. I'd also like to ask a question in regards to the process in the consultation and what proper consideration has been given towards violence against women and girls. I refer everyone to page 125 that lists the impacts that this decision may have. Underneath violence against women and girls, domestic abuse and sexual violence, also known as VAUDA SV, the impacts say see crime and disorder impacts. I looked at the crime and disorder impacts on page 124 and note that there makes no mention of violence against women and girls and the gendered nature of this crime. I do have concerns that if proper consideration isn't given to VAUDA SV, we aren't given our full duty to consider these impacts. I don't feel it's sufficient enough to just list general concerns of crime and disorder. We have a particular strategy on VAUDA SV for a reason, and that means that particular consideration does need to be given to this. further under the impact assessment, first stage on page 143, we see that sex is not affected, with the caveat that it does have greater impact on women. I'd like to kind of understand why that's listed as no, but then with the caveat, and can I ask for reasons why we aren't separating out crime and disorder with Vouder SV, given that the council's healthy relationships and stronger communities Vouder SV strategy, and why the impact assessment hasn't fully listed the impact on sex as yes.
Thanks, Steph. I'm not sure who wants to take this question.
Yeah, I'm happy to
Mike.
to start, Chair. I think firstly, obviously we were writing an impact assessment there that was covering two proposals, one being dimming and one being part night lighting. Now, I think we recognise in the report that we don't think we have done sufficient work on looking at the impact in terms of part night lighting, but we do think we'd need a pilot to help inform that, looking at the implications of that, because as you say, it's not something that's readily apparent what the impacts are. You need a consultation, and people need to be able to see what the impacts of it are. In terms of the dimming, I think the dimming, we did have trials of the dimming that members could go and see when it was happening. We've got dimming in place now, which has been in place since I think it was 2016. We've had dimming that's happened since the energy went up, where we took 3 watts off all the lights as an emergency measure to try and mitigate the costs. And that's, we haven't had a single piece of correspondence or anything about that. So in terms of dimming, I think there's a lot of experience about that, and you can measure the impact a lot easier in terms of when people whether they, you can dim the lights and people can still see, but can they still see adequately, that type of thing. And so we haven't had any feedback at all on the 3 watts, for example. So an amount of dimming is okay. No one really notices. And then I think what we're really saying in the report is that that 25% is the limit, and that's what we would propose to do in order to achieve energy savings, as is required, because the cost has gone through the roof, as we know, for energy. So just trying to divide in terms of impacts, the impact of dimming versus the impact of part night lighting. So we accept we don't think we've done enough assessment in terms of part night lighting, and one of the things the pilot would do would be to provide us with more information to contribute to that.
Steph, do you want to come back on that?
Thank you. I really appreciate the reasoning for the consultation, but I'm afraid we haven't really kind of gone to what I was saying at all about addressing against violence against women and girls. We have a duty to properly consider that, and that's why it's laid out separately with crime and disorder. I'm really concerned that we're going to be moving to a pilot to essentially test women's safety without properly looking into it during the consultation. I had a look at the consultation. I reached out to specialist organisations within the area. Thrive Women's Aid, who are a frontline organisation for violence against women and girls, sexual violence and sexual exploitation, haven't had any correspondence from the council. I'm sure you can understand as a frontline organisation, they can't always kind of stay on the council website and things like that. So I think it would be appropriate before kind of jump into, well, let's do it and see if women get attacked, essentially. And I'm not trying to hyperbole, but this is kind of the reality of the situation. It seems incredibly risky to go straight to a pilot without consulting properly with specialist services.
Nicola, did you wish to come in on this?
Yeah, just for clarity, I think as the recommendation is trying to articulate, is that we are fairly comfortable with the impact of dimming. As Mike has indicated, it's not really noticeable for the vast majority of people, and we've had no feedback since we started doing that. We had no feedback when we trimmed the lights previously, so that, you know, we are satisfied that the dimming of lights has not undermined health and safety or created any issues for women or other stakeholders with it, or people within our communities. I think the issue you're referring to may be in relation to part nighttime lighting. Now, we're not proposing to implement part nighttime lighting under this report. What we need to do is to have a geographically specific pilot study so that we can actually get evidence to demonstrate whether or not it is having an impact or not. And if it is having an impact, we'll be looking at the impact upon all members of the community. But we can't really make a decision in the future without that evidence. And we know that sort of studies have been undertaken in other parts of the country previously. But for members of Neath Talbot Council to make an informed decision going forward, we think it would be appropriate for them to have the feedback from a study undertaken within Neath Talbot. And what we are proposing under recommendation 3 is that you have sight of where we will do it, over what period of time we're going to do it for, and what times of the nights are those lights going to be turned off and then turned back on. The likelihood is that they are going to be turned off, you know, in the early hours of the morning when traffic, whether it's pedestrian traffic or vehicular traffic, is going to be very small. So, but the whole point of this pilot study is to establish what those impacts are, and then we can feed that back to members to ensure that you have sight of all those impacts. And then, as I said, you can make an informed decision going forward if we ever need to be in that position going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Nicola. Steph, you can come back very briefly, and then we've got a few other members who need to come in on this item as well.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. My question hasn't been answered. My question is about why violence against women and girls hasn't had its own separate impact. As you know, it's listed within the consultation and the impact assessment. We have to consider violence against women and girls as part of its own separate issue that needs to be addressed, and I do want to get an answer out of officers as to why it's only considered under well, it's not even considered under crime and disorder. It's not mentioned at all, and I'm really keen that I get an answer as to why.
Thank you, Steph. Does anyone want to come back and try and address that question, Nicola?
I can only apologise to members if they feel that we haven't answered that question. I think the reference to the crime and disorder response within the screening opinion was on the basis that we didn't think that there would be a significantly different impact upon women who are subjected to violence over and above other members of the community. However, should we progress with the pilot study, we can explore that in far more detail, and we can explore the impacts upon women at that stage. But I can only apologise we haven't specifically referred to it within this report.
Thank you, Nicola. Okay, I'll move on now to Councillor Rob Wood. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. As you're aware, I've had concerns with the consultation initially going out, but now we have the results. 36%, strongly disagree with switching off the lights. They've given us a response, and we've got to look at this response and we've got to take heed of it. The police have given their response. They're not in favour of the switching off. I don't see where we're coming from on having a trial or a pilot on the lighting. I mean, I would have thought, answering Nicola's point there, that we would have switched them off at night to see what the difference is. We wouldn't switch them off during the day. But, it doesn't take, a consultation or an evidence-based trial or whatever to show that, it's going to get darker if you switch the columns off completely. Whereas I'm willing to acquiesce to the dimming suggestions. Obviously, we need to save electricity, so to see it, without budget constraints, and we need to dim the lights. But to actually switch off columns, I have to agree with my colleague, Councillor Grimshaw, in saying that, it's going to be the early hours. That's when you will get probably vulnerable teenagers and girls coming home at that time. They don't all come in by 9 o'clock these days. They stay out late, and we are going to knock the lights off at the time when they are at their most vulnerable. I've read the report, and I can see that 1 and 2 on there. Yes, okay, fair enough. But the new amalgamated 3 and 4 that was on there, where we're looking to do a trial of something that a lot of us are not happy with anyway, full stop. So why do the trial? Why go through that? And why indeed put residents' lives at risk by switching the lights off completely? That's my view on it. Thanks.
Thanks, Robert. I'm going to take another question before I go back to officers. Councillor Cathy James, you did indicate in pre-briefing. Did you wish to come in?
Yeah, I did. Nicola's partly answered the question, actually. It was around consultation with other local areas that have carried out similar policy. So, for example, Powys County Council started part night lighting in 2008. So they've basically had a 16-year experiment in it. So I wondered if we'd had a look at information from them in terms of what did work and what didn't work, because I know they did have a lot of pushback against the decision. But in a lot of places, in Cumtoch, where I live, there's been no lighting in the early hours of the morning since 2008 until you come to my house, which is the first house in Neath, Talbot, which has a street light outside it, which is lit. But I think it's worth, especially if we're exploring the effects on crime and disorder, to see if they have got any evidence about upticks in crime and incidents like that. And while I take the point that it's more valuable to have local information, I think we shouldn't dismiss evidence from other areas as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Cathy. Nicola, did you want to come back?
Yes, please, if I could, Chair. I think it's important for us to get evidence, as I said earlier on, and has been sort of referred to by Councillor James. We need evidence of the impacts within Neath Talbot. We can make informed decisions from evidence from other authorities, but there's nothing better than having our own evidence in terms of how any decisions that the council are considering taking going forward have an impact upon our businesses, our communities, and our residents. I think there has been an assumption in the past that the potential proposal to undertake part nighttime lighting to ensure the delivery of savings was going to be a blanket approach across the whole of the county borough. That is not the case. I don't think it was ever intended by officers to switch every light off within the county borough between a certain period of time during the middle of the night. We need to identify which areas have got the least risk associated with them, and that is easier said than done. I appreciate that, but there was no intention to ever suggest that every single light within the county borough would be turned off. And whilst I appreciate the need for street lighting is required at night time, there are parts of the night when, as I mentioned earlier, the frequency of traffic movements and pedestrian movements are very, very low, and those are the times of the night that we would probably be focusing on. And then the impacts of those pilot study during that period of time could be considered by officers and by members to inform any future decisions. We are not recommending the members consider part nighttime lighting at this stage. What we are trying to do is, as indicated by Mike earlier, is is trying to keep all options on the table. It's been a very difficult year this year to try and balance the budget for to actually achieve our budget for 23-24, and to actually balance our budgets going forward in terms of 24-25. You know, we are mindful that this could potentially get worse going forward. So we are having to explore all options to secure savings, reduce our expenditure to enable us to deliver all of the services the public are currently experiencing. We don't want to have to cut services going forward, because we are aware of the importance of those services to the public, to our businesses, etc. So to avoid us having to go down that road, we want to keep all options on the table. So we don't want to shut the door in relation to any budget savings, but in order for us to progress with those budget proposals going forward, we need that empirical evidence behind us to indicate quite clearly to all members, this is what we propose to do. This is the impact we foresee in relation to this proposed budget saving strategy. And then members can make a properly informed decision going forward. So hopefully that has addressed the questions that members have raised.
Thanks, Nicola. I'll perhaps intervene briefly before I bring in some other members. I think perhaps my take on is that I think it is right and proper that members can take a view that some things should be off the table. I don't think, even in the tough times we're in, I don't think it's unreasonable for members to consider that some services provided by the council are absolutely essential and shouldn't be touched. So I think the fact that we're having this discussion is right and proper. And I also think in terms of evidence and information that we've got, I think there's enough information in the consultation response perhaps to say we're not going to move forward with it, but actually what we do need, if we're going to want to consider it in the future, I completely accept, and I think everybody in the room would accept, if we're going to consider this down the line, we do need to do a lot more work. I guess the question is, do we want to keep it on the table or not, isn't it? And I think that's the way I'm looking at this discussion. If we want to keep it on the table, then absolutely members should expect that there's thorough evidence, thorough consultation to implement this in future. But if members wish to not have this on the table as a savings option, I think there's more than enough feedback from the public and the police to make that decision, in my view. That's just perhaps my take on it at the moment. I'm going to call in the rest of the members who've indicated, and then we'll see if we can round off the discussion a little bit. So I've got Councillor Andrew Dacey next.
Thank you, Sean. You said it's been 2016. Did you consult in 2016 before you took any action with regarding the lighting? And have we switched off lighting in past administrations? Have we done it before? Or is this going to be the first time you've done it?
Thanks, Andrew. I did have another indication from Councillor Tim Bowen in pre-briefing. Tim, did you have a question?
Andrew's just asked the question for me, Chair.
Oh, no problem. Okay, Nicola.
I think,
come in.
yeah, I was going to say, I think Mike's going to have to come in on that detail.
No problem.
Just going through dimming, a little bit when we had our major renewal project, we first of all, I mean, dimming first came in back in I can't remember, very early on in the late around 2010. When we did the major renewal project, we took a decision to standardise a lot of the lights in the residential area. There were previously 35 watt and 55 watt lights, and for maintenance and ease of maintenance and cost in purchasing, we bought all 55 watt lamps, and where they were replacing 35 watt lamps, we dimmed them down. So that's when dimming first came into the borough. So there was dimming, but it was dimming to replace light for light, not to actually dim the lights. Then dimming was previously considered in about 2016, I believe it was, and there was a trial up in the Kimler that people went on. So again, that was some dimming associated with again, the lower wattage lights. And the dimming that we're now talking about is what previously wasn't dimmed was the high energy, high pressure sodium lamps. And since they've been renewed with LEDs and also electronic switchgear with the Salix money that we've had, we now physically can dim those if we wanted to. So those are the lamps that we're talking about. It has, I say, dimming it did happen for energy saving back in 2016, and there was a trial in the Kimmler that was associated with that. In terms of turning off lights, I was going to say no, we've never done it. That's not quite right, because when we did the this sort of major renewal project that we did, and the council invested £23 million. Some members may remember there was a lot of issues with the old 2-wire lines. 2-wire lines were lines that used to be 5-wire lines, and then the electricity board took their electricity off the lines, leaving just 2 wires, which only fed the street lighting. And what happened was the distribution company stopped maintaining those wood poles and wires. And when we did the major renewal, there was an individual consultation with all members in their areas, because we couldn't afford to put them all back into lighting and renew them all. So there was some lighting that was on wood poles that hadn't been in lighting for quite some time that were stopped to be in lighting as part of that consultation. So yes, we have taken some things out of lighting in the past associated with that, but other than that, no, we've not done any trials on part night lighting or switching lights off, and we haven't taken areas out of lighting like in adjacent areas. For example, let's say if you go from in Swansea to Gowerton, out to Pencloud, that whole road, you'll still see the stumps that are cut off where that's been taken out of lighting. More of a bypass, you'll see that's all they've been taken out of lighting in the past. We've not done anything like that in the past.
Thanks for that, Mike. Are you happy with that response, Andrew?
Well, Kathy's point comes into play there. So if they haven't had issues there, do we have any complaints when the lighting was off? Do we have any spike in criminality during that time? Because the dimming, I'm fully aware of the dimming. Switching off is obviously a different matter, but the consultation needs to be thorough before we make that decision.
Yeah, well, my colleague Dan Rees, the lighting services manager, is on the line. He may want to comment on the consultation that we did with other councils. The areas that where there were 2-wire lines and where the power distribution company had stopped maintaining them, they had been out of lighting for some time before we actually there was a formal decision not to replace it. And in each place where it wasn't replaced, there was a specific consultation with the local members at that time. Dan,
Okay.
did you want to? Sorry, Chair.
No problem. Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, with regards to conversations that have been had with neighbouring authorities, we have had discussions within the All Wales Lighting Group around part night lighting and the dimming of lighting. And as was mentioned earlier by Councillor James, with regard to power waste, Swansea had done the same as well with part night lighting. They took it through Cabinet. It got passed, and they had a lot of pushback with it, and then had to physically go back out and turn around on theirs again. So they had to put the light in, put it all back into lighting what they had done. The general consensus of the lighting engineers is that the dimming option is the best option to go for in the first instance, but part night lighting is possible. But again, further consultation with other authorities, other groups, again with South Wales Police and any other groups that are interested with the councillors as well, would need to be done deeper within the impact assessment if it is going to be looked at.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bowen, did you want to come in? Your hand was up briefly.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I did, but Andrew must be working on the same page as me this morning, so covered it.
That's no problem at all. Councillor Robert Wood. Rob.
Thanks, Chair. It's just a brief question coming back in on it. What I'd like to know as well, and we have sort of touched on it briefly, is should there be an incident, can we guarantee there will be no legal challenge to the council as a consequence of relating to switching the lights off? To my mind, I think, and after what I've just heard now, we're leaving ourselves wide open to legal challenge because we have, as an authority, got to legally maintain, a lighting system in the county borough. Thanks.
Thanks, Rob. Who wants to come back on this point?
I think I would say I think we don't necessarily have a duty to keep areas in street lighting. Of course, there's areas of the borough that don't have street lighting. Sorry, I've just lost my train of thought there. Apologies, Chair.
That's no problem. I can see the legal officer wants to come in as well. So do you want to come in, Joanna?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to provide the legal perspective on the query raised by the member, I think the issue here is regards to the decision-making process and whether there would be any avenue for legal challenge as regards to the decision-making process itself. So I think it's the issue for the members is as to whether they have enough information before them this morning to make the decisions based on the recommendations before them. So I think that's the key issue from the legal perspective.
The point I was going to add, Chair, was there are things like regulatory signs that have to be lit, things like that, which we wouldn't be taking out of lighting. So there are things that are covered by regulation, which we wouldn't do. And obviously, if there are accident hotspots, there are places where lighting has been put in for accident prevention reasons, they would stay in place.
Okay, thank you. I've got one more indication from Councillor Suzanne Patterson.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
I didn't get my card because I wasn't intending to ask any questions. I was just going to view. I think what I would like to ask is if members of the committee, and I don't have a vote on this, are minded to go for the consultation. It's not specifically mentioned in the impact assessment that is one of the criteria, the violence against women and girls, that they would actually be looking for. It would just be all in crime and disorder. And I think she makes a valid point that women and girls possibly might have that extra, I can't think of the word now, the disproportionality, that it would affect them greater. Yes, thank you. So I would like to ask if members are minded to go to consultation, which you haven't decided yet, would the influence of this action against violence against women and girls be taken into account during the consultation?
Thank you, Suzanne. It's a good way to round off the discussion as well. I don't know if Nicola or Mike wants to come back and maybe provide some reassurance to members on that note.
Yeah, shall I come in there, Chair? I think we've acknowledged that and apologised that we've been fairly generalistic in terms of the impact upon communities and have not been specific in relation to women and young girls. So we've apologised for that. In terms of if members are minded to endorse recommendation 3 and enable a pilot scheme to be undertaken as part of the consultation process, which will run in tandem with that, we will ensure that we do a deeper consultation and actually engage with specific organisations who support women and young girls to ensure that there is, the impacts upon those members of the community are really considered in depth. So we will do that as part of that consultation exercise. So I hope that provides you with sufficient reassurance.
May I come back?
Yeah, that's you can come back briefly, Suzanne.
Yeah, thank you, Nicola. I just think for dotting the I's and crossing the T's, this should have been in the impact assessment from the very beginning. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Just it's just been pointed out to me, just in terms of recommendation 3, there isn't specific mention of consultation within that, but I was just going to check whether it was in the report, perhaps in the body of the report instead. Obviously, we've had some verbal assurance from the director there, but I think that may be worth something for members to consider as well. I can't see any other indications from members at the minute. So, Nicola, do you want to just clarify on that point?
Yeah, yes, Councillor, I suppose we just made an automatic assumption that as part of that pilot study, the consultation would be embedded within that study. But if members want to be specific in a recommendation to include that deeper consultation, then as officers, we would have no objection to that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. What I'll do, we'll go through the recommendations in turn now, and take a vote on each of them. Obviously, if members wish to propose an amendment on that front, they're welcome to. I think perhaps members have been probably reassured on the fact there will be a consultation based on the responses. But we'll go through the recommendations now in turn and go from there. So members, the recommendations are listed on page 125 to 126 of the Cabinet Agenda Pack. Of course, that is for recommendations 1 and 2. Recommendation 3, the new recommendation 3 has been circulated via the chat in Teams. I also read it out earlier, but I will read it again when we get to it, just for clarity. Sorry, I've just got an indication in the chamber from Councillor Grimshaw.
Apologies, it is relevant to this process. I don't mean to interrupt. I know I'm not a member, but could members of the committee, are they able to put in for an amendment?
Committee members can propose an amendment if they wish. That's entirely within their gift. So members, we'll start with recommendation 1, which is just for noting. So we don't require a vote on recommendation 1. That's to just note the consultation report, I believe. And then our second recommendation is recommendation 2, to approve the 25% dimming of LED lanterns. So that's included on those recommendations on 125 to 126. Can I have a proposal and a seconder for recommendation 2, please? Proposed by Councillor Rob Wood, and a seconder, please.
Second, Chair.
Seconded by Councillor Tim Bowen. Thank you. Okay, members, are there any abstentions on this recommendation?
I see no abstentions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it that this decision on recommendation 2 is supported to Cabinet.
I see no indications to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, recommendation 2 is commended to Cabinet.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, so we'll now move to recommendation 3. Just before we take that, are there any amendments being proposed by members today?
Again, I can't propose it myself. I'm wondering whether any online colleagues who are intending to vote for the recommendation, if I send them proposed wording, would they be willing to propose it if they think it's appropriate?
Just for clarity, I suppose, Stephanie, what are you proposing to suggesting gets added to the recommendation?
Yeah, sorry, it's very hard when not all members. I appreciate that online is very important, but so I'm proposed.
Can I come in a minute, please? Chair, can I come in a minute?
Yeah, of course you can, Councillor Bowen.
Yeah, I think this is dragging on a bit now, and you know, we need to put this to a vote before we keep going on and on and on.
Yeah.
Non-members are coming back and forth, you know, and we really need to move on now.
We are taking the vote on the final recommendation very shortly. I was just making sure that all members have had an opportunity to put forward any suggestions. I'm quite happy for Councillor Grimshaw to express what you wish members to consider as a potential amendment, and if members wish to put that forward, then they can. So if you want to just do that briefly, and if no members of the committee come forward with any amendments, we'll move to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you. I do appreciate that. And I appreciate this is a long meeting, but it is really important. I'd be looking for any member that is willing to vote for this recommendation, if they could propose, and I will put it in Teams, the following amendment. And I appreciate that we've had reassurances from Nicola Pearce, but I just want it kind of in writing as a reassurance. Violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence is given specific and proper analysis in terms of the impact prior to any action taken.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. Obviously, Councillor Grimshaw is not a member of this committee and can't formally propose that. It is up to committee members whether they wish to take that suggestion on board. So I'll just, if anyone does wish to indicate on that now. Councillor Cathy James.
Yes, I'm happy to take that amendment forward.
Okay, thank you, Cathy. So you were proposing that that wording is added to the already amended recommendation thing that's been circulated in the chat previously.
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Let me just take some quick advice from Democratic Services colleagues to make sure that we deal with this process correctly. Okay, just for clarity, Democratic Services colleagues are just going to paste into the chat the suggested amended recommendation from Councillor Cathy James, and then we'll take a vote on that amendment.
Chair.
Sorry. Okay, thank you for your patience, members. Just making sure we get this this process done correctly. So the amended recommendations in the chat. Councillor Cathy James proposed it. Can I just have a indication of a second, just to make sure that we do have a seconder for that? I see Councillor Laura Williams. Okay, so members, on the amendment, on making the amendment to recommendation 3, can I have any indications, any abstentions first on the vote for this one?
Is this the abstention on the amendment?
Yes.
Right, I abstain.
Thank you, Councillor Rob Wood. And do any members wish to vote against the amendment?
I see no. Oh. Mike Roberts would like to come in, Chair.
Mike?
Could I just ask for a point of clarification, please, Chair?
Of course.
So is that something you want to see in the report that we bring back, how we intend to achieve that, or has that got to be done before we bring a report back? Because it says before any action is taken. So are you satisfied that we set out in the report that comes back, setting the details of the study, how we intend to achieve that recommendation?
Councillor Cathy James, can I perhaps go to you as the proposer on that one, just for a steer?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just rereading it. You're right. The wording is slightly ambiguous, isn't it, in terms of. So we're saying to approve the study, and prior to the pilot, the further report is brought back. I think at the point that the report is brought back, in that report, we want to know that the violence against women element has been considered, and possibly how that is also going to be tackled during the pilot. So if any further action does need to be taken. So yeah, if we make sure that in the report we've got evidence that it has been considered fully, and that yeah, obviously we've talked about consultation taking place as a built-in part of this. So yes, the report needs to have evidence that consideration has been given.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. Does that help you, Mike, in terms of clarity of expectations?
Yeah, it does a bit, but I think the fact that, as we say, we'll be taking that forward further, won't we? In that, when we do the pilot, we'll be taking that specific consultation issue consideration further forward. So that's the point for me.
Nicola?
Yeah, just to clarify, it may well be beneficial because obviously the recommendation towards the end, where we've added in addition that violence against women, etc., has been added. Perhaps we could change that to, as part of the pilot study, full consultation shall be undertaken, and this must include specific consultation to address the potential impacts against women. Potential to address the potential impacts in terms of violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence, which shall be considered specifically as part of that consultation exercise. Perhaps we could potentially have a 2-minute sort of recess to put that in writing quite clearly so members know what they're considering, and we as officers know what you want us to deliver should Cabinet Board accept that amendment, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. I think that's some helpful insight and clarity there. So if members will just bear with us for a couple of moments while we get that into the chat, and then we'll hopefully move forward with this vote. Diolch.
Just so everyone's aware, we're currently working on the wording at the moment, so it will be posted into the chat shortly. So basically, what we've done so far as a voting process will end, because obviously we're making a change to the wording, and we'll just start again with this wording, and then if Councillor James is still happy to propose, then we can go from there then. But we're just waiting a moment for that wording to be finalised.
Okay, members, the new proposed wording's just been posted into the chat. So if I could just ask Councillor James just to read that over, and if she's happy to propose it. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to propose that.
Thank you, Councillor James. Can I have a seconder for that
Yeah.
amendment, please?
Happy to
Laura
second
Williams,
again.
thank you. So we'll now go to the vote on this amendment. Are there any abstentions?
I see one abstention, Chair.
Okay. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I'll take it that you support this amendment.
I see no indications to the contrary, Chair. Therefore, this amendment is supported.
Okay, members, we now need to vote on the recommendation as amended to Cabinet Board. So can I have a proposer for the amended recommendation, please?
Yep, I'll propose.
Councillor Cathy James, and a seconder.
Yeah, second.
Thank you. Okay, members, are there any abstentions on this motion as amended?
I see no abstentions, Chair.
Okay, members, if you do not indicate to the contrary, then I will take it this amended recommendation is supported to Cabinet.
I see two indications to the contrary. Therefore, this has been supported to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Tom. Okay, thank you, members and officers, for your patience as we got through that very thorough discussion and through that voting process. So I'll now move members on to back to the scrutiny agenda briefly, just to look at agenda items 5 and 6. Committee action log agenda item 5, which is on pages 5 to 6. Which is an item for noting, and then the forward work programme on pages 7 to 8, again, an item for noting, and just a reminder to members, as always, if they have any items they wish to bring to the forward work programme, to please contact myself, Tim or Tom to discuss that. So I'll then take us to agenda item 7 on the scrutiny agenda, which is urgent items, and I have none. So we now need to move into private session to deal with the scrutiny of the last 2 items on our agenda today. So for agenda item 8, access to meetings, can I have agreement and a proposer to move into private session, please?
I move, Chair.
Proposed by Councillor Rob Wood, and a seconder, please, for moving into private session. I'm not sure who that was. Did you catch that? Councillor Bowen, was it? Okay, thank you. Members, if you do not indicate to the contrary by raising your hands, I'll assume you're in favour of moving into private session.
I see no indications to the contrary. Oh. Apologies, Councillor Bowen. We didn't quite catch what you said there. Sorry, Councillor Bowen. Can I just confirm that you weren't indicating
Didn't
to
say
the
nothing,
contrary?
Tom. Yeah, I didn't say nothing.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. Apologies there.
Okay, Chloe, can you confirm the recording stopped and the public